Hello, it's 24th of March 2020, and I want to talk a bit about the implications of what the Prime Minister has essentially ordered last night in his televised speech. Um, there's no other way to put it. Britain is effectively in lockdown. Um, and I'm sure there's other terms that we can use, but we are in an unparalleled situation here. At least nothing like this in my lifetime. As it stands, the statistics are as follows. This is from the source Worldometer, which is a fairly reputable source. Um, we have had 335 coronavirus deaths, 6,650 cases. Now, just to compare that, the 2009 flu pandemic, which had various names, the swine flu pandemic, avian flu pandemic, swine flu pandemic, Mexico flu was one that came about, but that had 28,456 cases in the UK and 474 deaths, but that was over a longer period. Um, the strange thing about that one, although that was also a pandemic, I don't remember the same level of social implications. I was looking at my 2009 newspapers on that, covering that, and it was a big story at the time. There was reports about the government and then the Brown administration, and the sort of strategies they were using, but I don't remember it being like this. Now, let me just say from the outset, broadly speaking, I agree with the Prime Minister's decision because I don't think there is any other way. As he said in his speech, no Prime Minister wants to take actions like this, but this is the sort of situation that governments need to be prepared for. You know, a pandemic is one of those top level things like a large scale terrorist attack, a state of war. It's something that is kind of galvanizes a whole country. Now, I've been a bit reluctant about making World War II analogies because I think there are some fundamental differences, and I'll come to those in a second. First of all, about the Prime Minister's speech. So, what can we do? We cannot congregate in crowds of groups of more than two. Police now have the power to break that up, so it's essentially a curfew of sorts. We can leave our homes to get essentials, food, um, medical supplies, and we're allowed out for exercise, which is makes sense. Um, but the Prime Minister stressed even this has to be um, infrequently. I may go in tomorrow for food. I'm not breaking the rules. I need to get food. Um, I'm concerned though that people are buying the cheaper products in the big stores like Tesco, so only leaving the more expensive products, and that does for people who aren't that economically stable, myself included, it's a bit concerning. Here's there's a lot of ways to look at this. Jonathan Ashworth, the Labour Shadow Health Minister, responded positively. I thought it was a measured response. He welcomed the Prime Minister's statement, but we need clarity on, for example, how vulnerable people will be provided for and how the law will be enforced. And as he pointed out, Labour have actually been calling for this. Nicola Sturgeon has also, within her jurisdiction, mandated this. This is unprecedented. I was talking to my father about this last night, or the night before, I should say, and I said, "Well, what about the '70s? You know, when there was like the 3 day week and there were power cuts and stuff. Was it like this?" He said, "No." He's 64 years old, so he doesn't remember anything like this in his lifetime. Certainly hasn't happened in my lifetime. And the BBC report call it hyperbole, but they said this is the biggest restriction on our lives ever, ever. Now, in normal circumstances, this would obviously be a civil liberty issue, but I think this really is a case that we need to see the bigger picture. Um, I'll be honest, I have some concerns about some things around this. And there are some practical questions. For example, the police have the power of arrest, or for example, people congregating in large groups. But let's say someone is going out for shopping And I guess this is what Jonathan Ashworth meant. How do they clarify? Someone could say, "Oh, I'm just going shopping." They could be breaking the curfew. So what I'd like to know is how is this practically going to be policed? I support it. I believe that's a necessary measure, but I do think it's a valid question to know how is this going to be policed? Because the police have limits on numbers. They can't just patrol every street and make sure no one's kind of breaking the regulations. So that's a question. I was a little concerned with cabin fever setting, like constantly being kind of cooped up. But I have to be honest, for my personal situation, it's not that unusual. I work from home anyway. I teach online. Um, I do go out occasionally. Obviously, I'm going to have to do that a lot less. I'll abide by the regulations. Um, my father's a clergyman. He's had to close his church, and I got a bit Piers Morgan, rent a gob. Made a very flippant statement where he was making this analogy about World War II and the wartime generation, and uh, this lot are whining about, being told to go home and watch TV. It's not that simple. And I was quite angry at Morgan for just dismissively putting it that way. As an example, like I said, my dad's a clergyman. A lot of his parishioners are older people in their 90s. They don't all have relatives, I mean, that are in constant touch. They certainly don't all use social media. So there are real issues here over social isolation. Necessary, but there are issues over the mental health consequences of this. And for Morgan to just, come out with his crass, I mean, yes, Piers Morgan, it involves all of us. What about you? I mean, if we're talking about essential work, I would say the news is essential. People need to know the updates. But do we really need Piers Morgan's opinions every morning? I mean, that's what it amounts to. He's a shock jock. Anyway, he's not the issue here, but I'm just making the point that people shouldn't be oversimplifying this. And I don't think people should sort of be making these comparisons to World War II and saying, "Oh, today's generation of snowflakes, what are people whining about?" There are real concerns that people have. I mean, older people who may be vulnerable, people with severe anxiety problems, people who may have other medical ailments and they may not have immediate relatives. There's a lot of issues around that. So I do think the government needs to make clarity on all these things, all of them. I think the Prime Minister's speech was good. I think it was pretty clear. It addressed the main points about what we could and couldn't go out for. But I think everything needs to be clarified in detail in terms of, for example, how will the policing be imposed? Um, that's a question for crime. I mean, like I say, I think actually crime will be reduced as a result of all of this because the curfew will apply to, let's say, jobs who might otherwise be out, for want of a better term, terrorizing people. It's universal, so that's good. Um, I've noticed that Johnson and his advisors have been using wartime terms, like literally the enemy. Matt Hancock, of course, has been an extremely busy man. There's sometimes when a particular department is more important than that you would usually be. For example, the health department isn't generally seen as one of the great offices of state. However, I wouldn't envy Mr. Hancock right now. I think, he and Johnson, people are always going to find fault, but I have to say the strategy taken today, I can't fault it. It seems like the right approach. It seems like the only approach, and it isn't going to be fun. I can see this having big impact on people who work regularly. Maybe it won't have such an impact on me. Like I say, I work from home anyway. I go out to get food, and we're still allowed to do that. Cinemas are closed. I've just checked out my local hairdressers to see what the situation is there. As you can see, I'm starting to pile up the hair. So they'll be resuming in 2 weeks under regulation. I live by myself, so I was a little concerned about. Usually, it's fine that it's not an issue for me, but like I say, and these are with the streets being dead as well. Can't go into coffee shops. It's going to be strange times. This is going to be a very challenging year, and I think that it will challenge us. Now, about these World War II analogies, it's a little bit flawed. I understand why the analogies are being drawn because we haven't seen anything like this in terms of well, we haven't since World War II in terms of day-to-day destruction. But that disruption was different. That disruption was in the form of Blitz. People worry were they going to be blown to smithereens when they went to bed. 67,000 British civilians died in air raids in World War II. It's a huge figure, and that set in a real psychology, which was the whole, spirit of the Blitz, and that's something that only those who went through it will ever really understand. So in that sense, we're not going through that challenge. We don't have to worry that, oh, every night is there going to be a bomb dropping on this house? I mean, that must have been absolutely terrifying. However, when people, and I've noticed this has become a bit of a generation thing, oh, the young generation just ignore the advice. Well, when you get Mr. Weatherspoons not so long ago vowing to stay open, and this mentality, there was one, I think it was Godfrey Bloom, no, during the Blitz we didn't close pubs. Yeah, but during the Blitz, the point about the bombs and the Blitz was they weren't touching everything in the sense of, they weren't infecting staircases, they weren't infecting door handles. They were that what they were. They were devastating. They were horrible. They affected everyday life, but it was a different kind of disruption. That was blood and death, and it was instantaneous. This is going to be more protracted, I think. I mean, that's the bit that really concerned me. A sort of BBC data, well, the data they had in the report said there are only three ways out of this. That the vaccine gets developed, and apparently 1 year is actually very quick in terms of how vaccines are usually developed. They usually take years. So if it was developed within 1 year, that would be great if it was available. And that, of course, is the essence. It needs to be commercially available. The other thing is if enough of us get infected that there sort of builds up a natural immunity, this controversial herd immunity argument. And the third thing was if we abide by the lockdown, we all stay in, and I forget what the third one was. I think if it kind of pans out naturally, but the problem is it's a new virus, so it's still the it seems to me that the way it's spreading, the way it's not fully understood. That seems to be the issue. Um, the symptoms are understood and so on, but um, I'm personally not worried. I mean, like I reiterate what I said in the previous video. I am really not worried about the virus itself. I don't think I'll get affected. I don't think, but I'm not saying that in a blasé way. It's very possible, but I do think that the social implications are hitting now, and I think the government had to take this approach because we are following the same trajectory as Italy. That country's had over 6,000 deaths, and their healthcare system is overwhelmed. It's a humanitarian crisis almost in Italy. So I think the governments looked at that and they thought we need to get ahead of this and not let the situation develop on the same trajectory as Italy. For that reason, I don't think we'll be as bad as Italy because we have taken these measures, whereas the Italians, as they always say, were complacent. I've noticed people are still commuting around and around. They're still traveling from city to city. Um, I know we're not meant to be touching our face, but I'm by myself, so it's those things, it's practical things, easier said than done. Um, I really can't think of anything that has affected the world in such a way. I mean, there was a Great Recession, of course, was had global implications. There was September 11th attacks had global implications, but I don't remember anything having such a direct effect on so many people. I not in my lifetime. Um, and in such a universal way. We've had other pandemics in my lifetime. We've had the ongoing AIDS pandemic. We've had 2009 swine flu pandemic, Ebola, and SARS, and so on. So there's been others, but I think because of the necessary measures that have been taken with this, because of the nature of this being a new virus, and so on, its implications are different. Um, I really, really hope that the big stores don't get greedy and put up prices. That would be disgusting. Like to say, the last time I was in Tesco's, tuna, a little tin of tuna is usually 59 pence. It was 99. So I hope they're not subtly putting up prices. That would be pretty despicable if they are. Um, so that's it. Personally, I've plenty of reading material. I've got an internet connection. I can keep in touch with friends. So it's I think I can handle it, but it just puts in context. And the analogy with World War II, all I would say is we can't know what they went through. There are, of course, some older people who did go through it. We can't know what that was like. And I think it would be wrong to say it's the same thing. It's clearly not. So in that sense, Piers Morgan was right. What he is wrong about is to kind of dismiss it as, oh, well, it's an easy thing. It's black and white. Just stay home. I am genuinely concerned for people who have serious mental health problems, people who are older, the social alienation coming from that. I think the government needs to give some clarity on that and how they can be provided for. It's very important. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of people suffering in silence. They're going to be on their own in their house, and I really do sympathise with them. I have a lot of sympathy for people who are stranded in other countries, and that's not an easy one. It's difficult because they're stranded, but if we organise flights to bring them back, is that just going to spread contagion? These are not easy questions. I think every aspect needs to be looked at. Maybe the government could do something like the way they're supporting businesses. If Britons who are abroad are out there longer than they needed to be, I'm not just talking about holiday makers, I'm talking about business people. Maybe the government can give them some sort of funding or something. I don't know. They need to live on something. And let's say they were out for a work contract, they were out there for 6 months, and then they stay longer because of the situation. They can't get out. Well, if they're not working, they don't have money. They need to be fed. So all these things need to be considered. Um, I think we're doing the right thing to contain the pandemic, and I do think the tide will turn. I think the danger, though, is we get complacent and we think, oh well, there's no new cases, it's all settled down. We lift the restrictions, then it all just breaks out again. And I think today the overwhelming response I've seen for people has been supporting the government. They're doing the right thing. Um, but I do think human nature being what it is, at people are going to, at some stage, people are going to start saying, well, it's over now, let's get out. They'll get complacent, and that government will have its hands tied, or not its hands tied, but they'll. Yes, the other option, actually, I've just remembered the third option was that we deal with it. We live with it forever. We just change our life permanently. We change society permanently. That is just inconceivable because sporting events have been cancelled, cinemas have been closed. I don't think you could shut down normal life that way forever. I just think that would lead to major social unrest because people need things to keep them sane. And okay, we've got the internet, you have reading material. Well, I do. Not everyone does. Um, let's hope to God Wi-Fi works smoothly. These are all important things. So that's how I feel. I've mixed feelings about it. In a sense, I think there's good things coming out of the world slowing down. I really do. I think it gives us all an opportunity to just slow down a bit to reflect on things. We can read more, we can just think more, we can spend time with our families. There's things that we could do that maybe we didn't do before. So I don't think this is all negative. I think good things will come out of it. And even maybe a spirit of COVID-19, who knows, that we'll be talking about 30, 40, 50 years from now. Who knows? But It's quite incredible to think. I remember sort of reading about this in December 2019, and it was kind of a backstory because at that time it was all about the various revolutions going on in the world, protest movement. It was about the Trump trial. It was about the US-Iran tensions. If you remember at the start of the year, that was a huge story, and this was kind of secondary. Then around February, it started becoming a bigger story and a bigger story, a global pandemic, and now this, in a space of 3 months, from a backstory on the other side of the world to hitting our everyday life. And that's how pandemics go. And it's quite something. This was yesterday's Times, incidentally. So that's obviously just ahead of the Prime Minister's speech today. Okay, everyone, stay safe. I'll be making updates on this naturally as time goes on. I'll be looking at updating my channel and doing different things. I don't know, but stay safe. Wash your hands. I do sympathise with businesses a lot, but it looks, and I haven't looked at it in detail, but it does look like the Chancellor's budget is providing a lot of respite for that. It would need to, otherwise we'll have a massive economic downfall because you can't have loads of businesses not doing trade, and so I think Sunak knew that this was coming. He and Johnson spoke about this, and that's why the budget was as it was. So it's necessary. Right. Stay safe and let me know your thoughts.